Welcome back to the Politics with Paul podcast. I'm your host, Paul Rader. Today we've got another guest episode, but not just one guest. We have two guests whom I will introduce shortly. But first, whether you are new to the show or not, I always lead off guest episodes by stating that I do not take a specific stance for or against anybody's political views or any political groups they belong to or any things that they worked on. But fortunately, that has not been an issue before, and it won't be today either, because today our topic is on bipartisanship, specifically when it comes to legislative advocacy across the political aisle. How do citizens advocating for bills effectively reach out to both Democrats and Republicans that are in elected office and in interest groups, and therefore create a coalition to get needed legislation passed, or at least have a chance at passage? And here to talk about that today are two young guys, currently or formerly of the Florida Student Policy Forum, FSPF. They worked on several bills focusing on providing phone calls for prisoners on good behavior, expediting foreclosures, and reforming corporal punishment. And their work has been featured in various Florida news outlets such as the Tallahassee Democrat, Florida Phoenix, Orlando Sentinel, Gainesville Sun, and Action News Jax in Jacksonville. We have Graham Bernstein, head of the Alumni Board and former director of political affairs for the FSPF, and his mom also happens to be a former grad school professor of mine from the University of Florida. And then we have Jacob Kaplan, the current president of FSPF and a student researcher with the election lab at the University of Florida. So let's dive into these bipartisan legislative advocacy strategies. Guys, thanks for coming on to the show. How are you all doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Great, thank you for having us.
Hey, thank you guys for coming along. So whichever way you guys want to take turns in answering these, whichever way works for you. But let's just real quick tell the folks listening in about what exactly the Florida Student Policy Forum is and how you both came to be a part of it.
Sure. The Florida Student Policy Forum was started in 2021, my freshman year. It's funny, all the connections with my mother. A person who was trying to take a class with my mother, unfortunately, was not able to get into her class. But then my mom introduced me to him just because I was just starting out at UF and he's a year older than I was. His name's Andrew Taramikin. And he told me about this club that was being formed at UF with just the express goal of trying to get young people an opportunity to be involved in the public policymaking process, all the way from the just genesis of political ideas. This reform might make sense. This reform might not make sense, to writing draft legislation, to actually trying to lobby and get these policies implemented. And once I joined that club in 2021, that's what we've continued to do over the past 4 years, working on a bipartisan basis, operating as a nonpartisan entity, and trying to usher solutions to Florida's public policy problems through the process. Again, all the way from the genesis of ideas in the research stage to the lobbying stage before the Florida legislature and before local governments, sometimes, mainly the Florida legislature.
Gotcha. Nice. Jacob, anything to add there?
It put it pretty well in terms of my personal involvement. I just started at UF last year, and I was really trying to kind of explore a lot of different organizations, and I stumbled across the Florida Student Policy Forum, and it was just, it clicked right away. I met Graham at my interview for the forum, for the policy forum, and it was just like, instantly we were friends, and instantly I was kind of thrown into this, enthralling even world of policy, and just being able to make a difference like that so quickly. I didn't think that would happen, but that it was really meaningful to me, and it was definitely something that I knew I wanted to continue with.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to have thrown at you at a young age. Even now, I mean, I'm about to be 32, and it still feels like a ton being thrown at me. When I was at University of Florida, we had a group that I was a part of that had started. I'm not sure if they're doing anything anymore, but it was called Emerging Leaders in Science and Policy Advocacy. So it sounds a little bit similar to what you guys are doing as well. So it's really cool to see young guys that just starting their academic and professional journeys get into this process and have such a big impact on it. And so let's get more into that actual impact, because I was reading up a bit on these bills that you all worked on to try to get passed, and we'll talk more about how successful they were later on in the interview. But they focused on foreclosure reform regarding abandoned properties, especially phone calls for certain prisoners and school corporal punishment. So tell the listeners at home a bit more about these bills and what they sought to do.
Sure. I can speak some to them, and then I want to ensure that my voice is not just endless, because I am a gregarious individual who is never done. So I'll give a summary just because I've worked on all three, and then I will defer to Jacob. But those three policies, the foreclosure reform, the school corporal punishment reform, and then the prison phone calls policy, in one way or another, we've worked on those for the past 4 years. Jacob, again, talking about meaningful opportunities to get involved in the public policy process. I would rather not have spent my time on anything else, because we've been able to do a foray into all kinds of different policy spaces. The corporal punishment policy is quite straightforward. There are still 19 school districts in Florida which authorize the usage of school corporal punishment in the public schools as a form of discipline. Florida state law, as compared with other states that still allow school corporal punishment, like Mississippi or Louisiana, is unbelievably lenient. It doesn't prohibit the usage of school corporal punishment on any groups of students, like students with disabilities. Until our law passed, there was no state requirement that a parent be asked before the usage of the punishment. There really are no prescriptions in state law about even the dimensions of the implement that is used to administer the physical discipline. And when we read about just education policy in general in Florida, there were articles talking about various incidents, like in Hendry County in 2021, where you have little kids committing various offenses because they're children, right? And then the school administrators or school principals, in one way or another, are telling their parents or not telling their parents, your child has done something wrong, we're going to use school corporal punishment. There's really nothing you can do to object to it after the fact, even if you go to local prosecutors or law enforcement, because state law is so lenient around school corporal punishment. Again, until recently, there was no parental right to object to the usage of school corporal punishment in state law. So this is the school corporal punishment bill. Again, just a rough introduction. The prison phone calls policy, again, is somewhat straightforward. It's predicated in the idea that there are decades of research on the benefits of keeping incarcerated people in touch with their loved ones, in terms of making it more likely for them to reenter society successfully, reducing the need for the taxpayers to spend money on their reincarceration, and also just ameliorating the negative effects of incarceration on the family members. There isn't much competition in the prison phone call market. The rates that are charged are extremely high, because that money that is made is then given back to the prisons kind of as a commission payment. And the families are the members who have to actually pay for these calls. So the goal of our pilot program there is, if a prisoner is demonstrating that they want to be rehabilitated, why doesn't the state put some money towards making that call more affordable for rehabilitative benefits? And then the foreclosure bill, the idea of that is that Florida has a judicial foreclosure system. You have to go through the court process to foreclose on these abandoned properties, even if they're egregiously abandoned. Not only is somebody not paying their mortgage, but the doors are off of the hinges, there are no utilities being provided. You still have to go through this onerous court process that's just expensive for everyone all around to foreclose on the property, and just leaves it there like a zombie home. And the goal of our bill was just to say, look, if a property meets certain criteria of abandonment, you should be able to go through the foreclosure process like that and get this property actually taken care of. I think that's the rough summary I'd give of those three policies that we've worked on over the past 4 years.
Gotcha.
I think you covered it pretty well, Graham. I mean, I can really primarily talk about the school corporal punishment policy, just because that's what I've worked on the most. Just to add a little bit, something I said to the Florida Phoenix a few weeks ago was just that, it's kind of amazing that Florida didn't already have these parental rights protections, given that it heralds itself as a parental rights state. And it's about time that these are put into place. And it's a little strange that it came down to some college students to make it happen, but it happened nonetheless. Um, And yeah, I mean, I would also just highlight the fact that, corporal punishment is used disproportionately on disabled students. I think I read there perhaps around 20% of the student population in some counties, but we've got some counties that use it, corporal punishment up to 59% on disabled students, which is just kind of out of this world. And if clearly, you know, this doesn't happen just because disabled students just out so much more than other students. Oftentimes it's because of their disability that they're hit. I've read about cases where students with Tourette's syndrome are hit because of their tics, or students with ADHD are struck because of their fidgeting, that kind of thing. And it's just really sad to see that our government and our school system treats people like that in general.
Yeah, with the school corporal punishment in general, I didn't get to read fully into what the law, at least previously, had said about that, but it just made me think of because I a couple of months ago I did a presentation to this public affairs company in DC about best practices for how to read legislation for your clients, and one of the big things I talked about was a lot of legislation, you got to be careful about making it too vague. Like, what is it actually trying to target? How can people interpret it? And it seemed like that school corporal punishment, at least from the little bit that I read, was a pretty vague, like, hey, you can do this kind of thing if you need to, but not any real stipulations. Am I correct in that? Did I?
Correct. I think the previous language was like, it's moderate physical force used for discipline. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, what's moderate, what's necessary, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and with the abandoned properties, now I'm starting to think of whenever I travel through Florida and see all these abandoned buildings, I have to think about, I wonder if that's actually been foreclosed on. So just kind of funny things to think about now with all these with this kind of policy. So you talked a little bit about how you came to work on these bills specifically, so you can also go a little bit more into that if you want. But what about these bills drew you guys into them in particular? What were they, things that you personally had stakes in, or was it just, hey, this is something that really needs to get changed? I don't have skin in this game, but this is good policy. How was it exactly for you guys?
Jacob, I defer to you. You go first.
Well, I mean, mine's a little simpler. I was kind of just like lassoed in once I talked to Graham for the first time, and it really was something. I remember telling my mom something along the lines of what you just said. Like, this is something that really is important and needs to change. But it's not something where I was ever corporally punished in school. Down here in Manatee County, I believe they got rid of it in '89, I want to say. Um, but yeah, it's pretty much that.
Uh, yeah, with I'm not I'd have to look at exactly what Hernando County is, because I'm in Hernando County, which is about an hour. I'm about an hour north of Tampa, so I'm not entirely sure uh, how it was done for them. Is there anything you want to add to that, Graham?
Yeah. Yeah, I can give you a rundown of why I got involved in each. The corporal punishment policy, it just, to Jacob's point, it just seemed irrational. It seemed like an anachronism that was enduring despite society moving forward in every other way in terms of, I don't know, quality of healthcare, quality of life. And then you still have this frankly barbaric means of discipline clinging to life in the recesses of state statute with little to no limitations. Again, what is moderate or reasonable force? What is as is necessary to promote school rule? I mean, I can quote the statutory definition to you. That's from 1003.32. What does that mean? And moreover, the parental rights incidents, like Jacob was saying, statistics on disabilities, we did public records requests over the past 4 years. And to his point, you had some of these counties like Gilchrist County or Calhoun County, where 38%, 40%, 59% of the kids who got hit were disabled. They're not
Oh, wow.
59% disabled. The school district is not 59% disabled students, right? We're talking about
Yeah.
the overall public school district. And moreover, Florida has, again, like Jacob said, heralded itself as a parental rights state. We did the parental rights in education bill. We've done other bills related to discussion of sexuality or gender identity in terms of what pronouns or terms can be used to refer to students. I mean, people like Representative Doug Bankston, Representative, now Senator Stan McClain, former Representative Joe Harding, they've done bills on all these different matters because they believe this is somewhat of a crisis in our schools. And if you accept them at their premise there, I think the natural next step is parental control and physical discipline of kids should go hand in hand. And that was, I think, what really drew me into the corporal punishment policy is just we need to be consistent here as a state. You can talk about discussion of sexuality as to whether or not it is harmful to kids and this and that, but I think kids getting touched with a piece of wood when they're 6 years old could potentially be harmful to them. That was why I got involved in the corporal punishment policy. The phone calls policy was actually a presentation at UF at a summit that Jacob also went to when he started at UF, the Future of Florida Summit, where it just convened different public policy experts at UF and brought students together, and they gave presentations on different issues. And someone there, his name was Kevin Scott. He's with a group in Gainesville called Just Income GNV. And he's a formerly incarcerated person, just gave a presentation on issues with the correctional system. And he talked about the exorbitant price of prison phone calls. And I sat there recalling that I had read an article in the most pompous publication I could mention, the Harvard Political Review. But it was called Mother or Money, the Exorbitant Price of a Prison Phone Call. He's talking about the same issue in Massachusetts, the same wording is how he put it. So I thought, okay, we have 80,000 prison inmates here in Florida. If this is a problem, it's probably a huge problem, and it's probably making things worse for the families and expensive for all of us because most of these people who are incarcerated will get out eventually. And if they've been severed from society, what do you think will happen when they reenter society? And the foreclosure bill was mainly our colleague Adam's initiative because, to your point about seeing abandoned property in your community, he grew up in Jacksonville, and that community was hit devastatingly by the 2008 foreclosure crisis. So he wanted to do something about his community, and I was convinced by the arguments on that because in Gainesville, if you go to the eastern side, you'll see some more historic properties, including even some Victorian era stuff that's just abandoned and barren, but it doesn't seem like anything's being done to preserve it. That's where I'm coming from on these three bills.
Gotcha. Hey, that's really interesting. And sometimes it's good for people to get in that don't necessarily have a personal stake. It's a little bit more of a, maybe not necessarily like a neutral opinion, but you're at least able to take a little bit more of your personal feelings out of something if it's something that hasn't been that hasn't really affected you specifically or people But you started talking about some of the names of people that you worked with on these bills, so that's a good segue into this next part, which is technically a two-part question. So we're going to break it up a bit now, and that way listeners know both how you came to identify bipartisan coalitions for these bills and then how you got them to work together. So let's focus on that first part. Who were these bipartisan coalitions that you came up with, and why did you determine that they were the best partners to work with, whether they're in elected office or in interest groups or individuals?
You want to talk about corporal punishment, Jacob?
Yeah, sure. When the first year that Graham tried to run it, that was, Graham, I believe, got Representative Joe Harding to sponsor it. He then got indicted for, was it tax fraud, wire fraud? Wire
Just stole
fraud. So
COVID
that
relief money.
obviously
Yeah,
that fell through.
I remember him.
And then the next year we have Representative Waldron in the House, along with Representative Beltran and Senator, the late Senator Thompson, in the Senate, to sponsor it and run it. And I mean, Graham could speak to the reasoning behind those picks more than I could probably, but I know at least this year, it ended up being part of Representative Trabolsi's larger education bill for the year, um, and Senator Calatayud's companion bill. And those, Representative Trabolsi was really just somebody that supported us throughout the whole process. It got through her subcommittee last year, the 2024 session. And she was just a really clear choice, somebody that really cared about the issue to put this somewhere that it could really succeed.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and I'm happy to talk to that as well. Exactly as Jacob said, and as you were saying, we were quite intentional with the people whom we approached on the corporal punishment bill and the other bills. We went to Representative Harding because, as we were talking about, he did the parental rights and education bill, right? If anyone cares about parental rights, it'd be Representative Harding. Representative Robin Bartleman was also supposed to do the bill with him as his prime co-sponsor. Representative Robin Bartleman, of course, not being a Republican like Representative Harding, but being a Democrat from Broward with experience in special education issues. Those two legislators had a rapport. They would have been an ideal partnership for this legislation because they could have spoken to it from both perspectives. Then the next year, as Jacob said, when we went to Representative Catherine Waldron with what it was House Bill 439, that version of our school corporal punishment bill. Again, a Democrat from the Palm Beach area who just really cared about education, students with disabilities, who then partnered with Representative Mike Beltran, who was a more libertarian-minded, small government, civil rights defense attorney from, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember, the Manatee, Hillsborough area, Southwest Florida. Yeah, Hillsborough, Southwest Florida region. Again, that pairing went well together because you have people from literally opposite sides of the state, from different backgrounds, different political parties working together. Representative Beltran being a skeptic of the government's authority, and Representative Waldron just wanting to help kids out. And with Representative Trabulsi, for this most recent version of the bill that we got passed, there's just something she cared about. She was the chair of the Education Quality Subcommittee. She's a Republican, but she always works on education and child-related issues. Education quality is what she cares about. Programs for after-school reading and things like that, voluntary pre-kindergarten. This was something she cared about when Representative Waldron did our bill in 2024, and we came to her again in 2025 alongside our partners in Moms for Liberty, who are obviously the steadfast defenders of parental rights. And we just said, look, let's get something in state statute on this. And she was a leader, just like the past legislators we mentioned, on this issue and got that bill through. With the phone calls policy, again, similarly strategic. We went to legislators like Senator Jeff Brandes, Senator Perry, Senator Jennifer Bradley. All these people, either they had prisons in their district, they had worked on criminal justice issues in the past, closely with groups like the Florida Sheriff's Association. Maybe they even had past experience with the correctional system. But these are issues that were of utmost importance to them. That's why we collaborated with them on these prison phone calls related policy, because they had a track record of doing work on that matter. And for the foreclosure bill, this most recent legislative session, when we were trying to get it through, we went to Representative Vicky Lopez because she was doing a massive affordable housing package that in the past, her work on that topic had attracted bipartisan support. In other words, in each situation, we tried to target the proper people, whether it was because of their backgrounds or bills they had done in the past or whatever else.
And I will just add on that, a lot, really all of the bills and the policies that FSPF tackles are bipartisan or nonpartisan. And that, it's both a blessing and a curse in terms of the process as a whole. Just because, on the positive side, there's going to be many different stakeholders who may care about something. You have, for corporal punishment, for as an example, obviously for HB 439, we had Representative Waldron, a Democrat, sponsor it. We were in talks with Senator Chev Jones this session to sponsor a standalone. And then we also have people on the other side of the aisle, Representative Beltran, Representative Trabulsi, who care about school corporal punishment for their own reasons. And it's just something where if you can really build this coalition of people to work together, you have a good chance to get these important things done. And it just takes a concerted effort to kind of, for us, really, we have to be the glue for a lot of these different policies. But it's not that it can't happen. It's just somebody needs to say something and get involved in order to make it happen.
Do you mind if I throw one more thing in there really quickly on the topic? Just what Jacob was saying about building a coalition. It's all about rhetoric, and it's all about just trying to use that rhetoric to not only get to the legislators, but the interest groups. Because, again, a school corporal punishment bill, you could approach from the perspective of something like, I'm trying to think of a way to pitch it to a Democrat versus Republican. Just simply speaking, the government should not be using violence as a means of discipline on children, right? You could say that to a Democrat. But then you go to a Republican, and maybe you have some of these older legislators from more rural school districts. Maybe they were school corporally punished because they grew up in a rural area. They sent their kids to school in a rural area. They're not necessarily opposed to physical punishment as a form of discipline. And whatever you think of that, you pitch it to them the same way as a Democrat. They'll be a little skeptical. But if you frame it within the context of parental rights, Florida is a parental rights state, skepticism of government, that's how you can get these people to understand where you're coming from, not just that you're some adversarial leftist group or whatever, and you want to hijack the conservative political system of Florida, or vice versa, right? You could say the same thing about pitching a Republican on something versus a Democrat being the one who's more skeptical. And it's just that. And then going to the different interest groups who have been involved in the process, trying to find legislators whom they have a rapport or relationship with, and then trying to bring things together from the interest group side of things, the legislature side of things, the committee staff in the legislature, and then people in the governor's office of policy and budget. It's like a game of chess. You're watching all the different pieces trying to get them going. So sorry to add even more onto that, but Jacob got me thinking.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. Hey, who said bipartisanship is dead, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of already answered this question, so I'm going to try to rephrase it a little bit differently, because I was going to ask how you exactly got these groups to work together. Unless you want to really summarize it, you can summarize like how exactly you got them to work together, since they a lot of times are pretty disparate interests. But also, did you find it difficult to convince them to work together?
Yeah, I mean, at least for corporal punishment, it's something where somebody in the legislature actually quoted this to Graham and I one time, that 80% of the bills they do are really bipartisan, common sense issues, and then 20% are just partisan, whatever you want to call it, just partisan issues that they try to push through. And I think that really speaks to just how, you know, obviously there's some crazy people in government, but there's also a lot of really good people, and I think I've personally been convinced of that just by working with those who are in the Florida legislature and those who are on the staff. There's people who really care, and there's, I think it's definitely not easy, but it's also not impossible. And I just also would want to point out that, interest groups, Moms for Liberty, for example, I think my first call with FSPF was with them, like my first, participation in a call, and it was really cool to see how they rallied around the idea that we brought to them, and really incorporated it into their mission for the legislative session. I mean, we were one of their 6 legislative priorities. They got us, dozens of meetings with legislators. They came up to Tallahassee to advocate with us for this policy. They got us a meeting with the president of the Senate, Senate President Albritton, and where we just rattled off about corporal punishment for 30 minutes to him. It was a really cool experience, and working with them really made a big difference in terms of our success on this year.
Anything to add to that, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, we are in a unique situation here as a nonpartisan student group because, A, we're affiliated with UF. Many of these legislators like UF, or they went to UF. B, no one's paying us to do this. It's not like we're coming into the meetings with these legislators and you see the specter of big whatever supposed evil entity looming behind the lobbyists coming into the office. Right? I'm not saying all lobbyists are evil. We've met with a number of them. I have many friends who are lobbyists. But point being, it's not the same thing. It's just a bunch of 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds walking into the office saying, look, this is a matter of importance to us. We know that we are relatively small stakeholders in the process. We're trying to find things that might have been overlooked. We believe something ought to be done about this. And we go in there in our suits. We have the research. We have our one-pagers. Again, trial by fire over the past 4 years. We have a decent method down in terms of how to approach this stuff. We had one legislator start laughing during a meeting with us. We asked him why he was laughing. And it's because he said he'd had some lobbyists come into meetings with him and they didn't even know what they were supposed to be persuading him to do. But it's just, we just try our best, and we approach it again as a nonpartisan group. We might disagree with the legislator on 85% of what they've done, but if we can find common ground with them and try to make a difference ultimately for the state of Florida, why in the world would you pass that opportunity up? Do you want to just do nothing that you think will help with the state's progress towards a better society? So in terms of persuading legislators or interest groups, yeah, sometimes it's been troublesome because you want more than they're willing to give, or they're just not willing to take a position on a policy or whatever else. And that's where the give and take comes in, right? If you can get them to agree at an underlying level that something is a problem, then it's a question of taking, as Dr. Roger Austin always likes to say, 3 giant steps back and looking at the overall process and thinking, okay, how much do you give? How much do you take? How much leverage do you have? And then once you get somebody to sponsor your policy, it's still your policy, but not really, right? It's their bill now. It's Representative Trabulsi's bill or whatever. You have to take somewhat of a back seat and let them do what they need to do with their policy. But a big thing with the corporal punishment bill was disabled students. What really constitutes a disability, right? Is it people with more severe disabilities like autism? Or is it people who just have an IEP or a 504 because they have something like ADHD, right? To what extent is disability being used as the appropriate term here? That was something we had to do some give and take with legislators on to get them to agree. And that was why ultimately we just focused on parental rights with House Bill 1255 at the end of the day, because we wanted to accomplish something on the matter rather than nothing. That's the way it's generally gone. It's the give and take and just trying to meet people in good faith and not castigate them because they're coming from a different point of view, trying to see where you can meet with them.
Yeah, and that's a very easy thing to do, is to get mad at somebody. Well, I wanted to say, when you talked about how you're doing this for free, when you're doing it for free, you're an advocate. When you're getting paid, you're a lobbyist. And a
Exactly.
lot of people just I mean, yes, there's obviously a lot of issues with lobbying, but some people, I know I've heard some people talk about before, like, we need to get rid of lobbyists. Is like, you think you want that, you don't want that. There's definitely needs to be reform, but if you got rid of all lobbyists, there's a lot of things that would be grinding to a halt. But and Jacob said something I was going to remark on, but I can't remember what it is. Probably not important. A lot of the things I say are not important, but some of this, and you guys already got into this question a little bit, so I'll try to rephrase it. But some of this work you guys were talking about spans 1, 2, maybe even more years than that. You talked a bit about how grueling the process was. So I want to know more. Maybe what was the easiest part of the process for you guys, and what was the most grueling part of it, from the whole forming the coalitions to making calls to legislators, waiting for the legislative agenda to get the bills up so that they're heard on the floor. What were the easiest and hardest parts for you guys?
I'm gonna let you go. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say on this.
Boy, oh boy. I mean, look, I like state government because, to Jacob's point, we got to babble to Senate President Albritton, who's, again, one of the people in charge of $100 billion, $110 billion budget about school corporal punishment, which affects 19 counties in Florida, for 30 minutes straight. And he's sitting there asking us, how did you approach your research? How did you draft your bill? Actually inquiring about how we did our stuff. And we're sitting there taking 30 minutes of his time on this topic. My point in illustrating that is that state government is accessible. These people are accessible. They're part-time legislators. They're just normal people, right? At the end of the day, they're just normal people. And you can get in with them in the district office, in the Capitol, in the hallway of the Capitol, with their staff. Our whole experience is indicative of the fact that state government is uniquely accessible. And that's why I like it. Some of the challenges, though, are just that, again, it's a part-time legislature, 60-day session. There are term limits, so these people only get so much experience before they have to get out of there. And it's an enormous state, right, with tens of millions of people and $100 billion, $110 billion. The challenge, therefore, is you have a limited window sometimes. You might get 1 or 2 meetings with a certain legislator who's in some important role, leadership position, has other priorities, whatever else. You just need to maximize the usage of your time and try to get in there as early as possible, because members of the House can only sponsor 7 bills. You need to have your one-page summary, your bill draft. You try to know what the interest groups think, try to know what the history of the issue is, and then you just need to be tenacious. You need to be persistent. I have never in my life wanted to murder an inanimate object before, but Microsoft Outlook, I want to remove from the face of this earth because of the amount of emails I've had to send over the past 4 years, because these people are pulled in all directions, right? They can only do 7 bills. Leadership will ask them to do certain priorities. They can't say no to that. The agencies will ask them to do certain priorities. You're going to tell the Florida Department of Education you're not going to do a bill for them. They only have so much space and so much time. You need to get in there early. You need to be professional and be competent. And you need to be clear. This is exactly what I want from you. Can you help us or not? And if they can't, you need to go on to the next office and go and go and go until you can secure those bill sponsors. Because if you miss the filing deadline, or you miss the drafting deadline, or all the House members have filled up their bill slots, you go to a senator and they'll say, that's a great idea. Who's your House sponsor? If you don't have the House sponsor, you're waiting until the next year, or you're trying to shove your thing into a bill that's already been filed, and then you're theoretically hijacking somebody else's priorities with your own thing, right? It's complicated, but I'd say the best part of it has been how accessible everyone is. The downside has just been we're not exactly Wyoming with our part-time legislature, where we have a couple 100,000 residents and not $110 billion budget. There are other priorities beyond those of the Florida Student Policy Forum. How do you make it so that the limited window you get actually results in something? That's been the challenge over the past 4 years.
Right. And what about you, Jacob? I know you've had less time to be involved, but what about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Graham covered it pretty well in terms of, the challenge. Um, I would say it's that month before session, and then the 2 months of session are just absolute complete chaos. You might have your bill sponsors nailed down and your co-sponsors, and then it falls through on a random Saturday when I'm driving home from Gainesville.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like,
Especially this year.
Yeah, exactly. This year was, I presume, especially chaotic, although I don't know for sure. But we had multiple bills, policies where we worked. Well, not we. They worked for years on. I kind of just joined in at the end. That fell through, and some of them we rebounded and we got stuff done, like school corporal punishment, and some of them we just gonna have to try again this year.
Yeah, it's just not a linear process. Like Jacob said, you never know what will happen the next day.
No. And some of the rules are just so esoteric. Like you talked about bill filing deadlines, and then that doesn't even get into if you can pre-file, where you put bills in before the legislative session opens, and when you can do that, and single subject rules for legislation. It's just hold a can of worms. I do remember what I was going to say in regards to something that Jacob said about how most bills are bipartisan, and that is true in to varying degrees for every level of government. Most bills are not really contentious. It's just the ones that are contentious are the ones that get the most publicity. So it seems like there's more fighting than there actually is, because we enjoy reading about the conflict. But so now we went over the process of all of this. Now let's talk outcomes, because as much as important as the process is, and as sometimes all too focused on the outcomes that people can be, ultimately it is about the outcome of these bills. So what were the outcomes of these bills? Did they pass the legislature? Were they close votes, or were they handily passed? And did Governor Ron DeSantis veto any of these measures?
Go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, I mean, school corporal punishment, as we mentioned, passed. We originally had a standalone, which fell through, but thanks to the good grace of Representative Trabulsi, we got it. Part of it at least into her HB 1255 bill, which initially was very controversial. Very controversial. I mean, thanks to the Republican supermajority, it didn't so much matter that much in terms of its chances to pass. But, the controversy was kind of taken out of it, essentially, so far as I remember, and it passed pretty handily in the end
Yeah.
and was signed.
Yeah, with the corporal punishment bill, the first time we got it officially filed and debated was House Bill 439 with Representative Waldron in 2024, and Beltran, of course. That passed the Education Quality Subcommittee in the House unanimously. Again, there was some demurring about definition of a disability. The youth are, I'm going to remember an exact quote. Are the youth trending positively in terms of discipline these days? I remember that was another quote from one of the members of the committee. There were some reservations, some misgivings, but at the end of the day, it passed through that committee unanimously because Rep. Beltran stood up, figuratively stood up. He was sitting down, and said, look, I work with civil rights all the time. I've worked civil rights as an attorney, educated at Harvard for decades and decades. I'm a libertarian. I don't think the government should have this power. I think we as small government conservatives should be consistent. And it made it through the Education Quality Subcommittee in the House unanimously with Representative Trabolsi's leadership. After that, we ran into some obstacles again on that definition of a disability. Bill didn't make it further than that. Then this 2025 session, like Jacob said, we were able to get some of our corporal punishment language after our standalone bill fell through into HB 1255 by Rep. Trabolsi. The challenge there was, like he said, there were some other controversial elements of that bill. I don't know if you remember stuff like the Baby Olivia video or things like that. Had to do with abortion or not abortion.
Vaguely, I think.
The opponents
Embryonic development.
Yeah, embryological development. The opponents alleged it had to do with forcing kids to watch videos that had to do with abortion. Point being, our stuff was shoved into a bill that had some other controversies, but then they added things like an opt-in component to that. And I don't remember exactly what happened with the other controversial stuff. Point being, that bill sailed through. I don't remember if passage was unanimous at the end of the day, but that bill sailed through and the governor signed it, and it took effect July 1st, which means our school corporal punishment protections and state law for parental rights are now in effect for this next school year. The prison phone calls policy had an interesting journey. In 2023, we went and got Senator Bradley to lead on that matter with the assistance of Senate Criminal Justice Subcommittee and House Criminal Justice Subcommittee, the Budget Subcommittee.
Jennifer Bradley, for anybody listening at home.
Yes, Senator Jennifer Bradley. She absolutely took the lead on this, was able to get $1 million appropriated to run that pilot program from 2023 to 2024. It was in a really specific fashion. I think for every 3 months that a prisoner demonstrated good behavior, they'd get a 15-minute phone call for free per month. Again, it was quite strategic. They had to determine what they could do with the money that was in the Inmate Welfare Trust Fund. That ran for a year. Then the legislature, the House and Senate, wanted to expand in the 2024 session the funding for that to $2 million. They wanted to do $1 million recurring each year and then add $1 million on top of that. In other words, they wanted to make it more permanent. The governor vetoed it because he wanted to cut state spending across the board. So the 2025 session, this past session, we went and we tried to revive the prison phone calls pilot program again. We got $1 million appropriated again from the House and Senate. Again, we've met with the governor's public safety unit and his Office of Policy and Budget for years on this matter, literally years. They keep seeing my annoying face. And they said, look, again, it was about budgetary matters. He wanted to cut a certain amount of spending. Your thing, unfortunately, met the chopping block. Try again. We did try again. It got vetoed again. So we'll see what the future of that pilot program is. We'll certainly revisit it in the 2026 session and go to the governor's team and say, look, what can we do to get something on this matter again? Because again, it was a bipartisan policy that improves on public safety, which the Republicans care about. And then for the foreclosure bill, we got it into Representative Vicky Lopez's House bill. Oh gosh, what was it was the Live Local package. I forget the exact bill number, 943 for the 2025 session. We got it included in one committee hearing. It passed. But then overall, she encountered some opposition to her big housing package, which is the downside of adding your thing to a massive omnibus bill, is they might hate other parts of the bill. And then your stuff gets cut to water the bill down overall. So we'll see what the future of that foreclosure policy is as well. I hope that all made sense going through the three different priorities.
I think so. Yeah, with the omnibus, I mean, yeah, Florida has a single subject rule for legislation. For those at home, single subject rule. Most state legislatures have it where your bill can only focus on one policy area. Now, what exactly constitutes one policy area? I mean, that could be different, but there are some sort of little loopholes that you can go around for that. But Jacob, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think he covered it pretty well.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and look now that we've got the outcome that we just looked at the outcomes for all these bills. But now let's look towards the future a bit. What were, for both of you, what were 1 to 2 takeaways from each of you that you learned about from this whole process that you're going to take forward with you in your future advocacy efforts?
Go ahead.
I would just say that don't be, afraid or embarrassed. I don't know if those are the right words, but to kind of stick your neck out there and stand up and that it can be done. Like people like us, just college students can really influence things, given a strong effort and strong will to do so.
I
Graham?
would, yeah, I would say that this whole experience has illustrated to me that compromise is not a dirty word. You need to be able to meet with people where they are. If you want to accomplish something on public policy matters, sometimes you need to be willing to give some. Sometimes you need to be willing to advocate more and go out on a limb. But this whole experience could not have happened without compromise and bipartisanship. And I think that's something that's been implemented in my mind for the past 4 years as a result of this experience.
Hey, that's fantastic takeaways. I think that's really, because the political process can be very disheartening for a lot of people, and sometimes I feel that way too. But this kind of thing really shows how there is reason to be optimistic, how you can make a difference. So hopefully for you at home, a lot of times you might feel pessimistic, but there's reason to have hope. These are young guys here, and they made a big difference in the legislative process. So now, from your own future advocacy efforts to other people's future advocacy efforts, what are 1 to 2 pieces of advice that each of you would give for other advocacy groups?
I would say similar to what Graham said, but really like reach across the aisle, like, um, be okay with not getting necessarily everything that you were hoping for, and that's not the end of the world. That's not the other side being evil. That's just how the process works. There's probably equally dedicated people on the other side that have different priorities, and so working something out and getting something at all, some improvement, is really worthwhile. I mean, we started corporal punishment wanting to axe it entirely from Florida statute, get rid of it, no more. But that obviously got pared down over the years, and if it didn't, we wouldn't have gotten anything. At least in my opinion, I don't think we would have. I don't think at this stage we would have been able to get anything.
Sometimes got to be small steps first. Graham?
Yeah, I apologize. I have an atrocious internet connection, so hopefully I can still be heard before I answer this question. I apologize if not.
This is all right. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, Jacob is absolutely right. You can't take things personally because it's not necessarily personal at all, right? It's
Right.
These legislators have their own backgrounds, their own experiences. They're coming into this to their extent they believe they're representing their constituents, right? And you could have the most impeccable policy pitch in the world. You could have meticulously crafted statistics and everything else. It's just none of that matters if you can't work your policies through the process, if you can't meet people where they are. Again, talking about this process imprinting the importance of compromise in my mind, you need to be able to win some and you need to be able to lose some. I say lose some. You need to be able to give some. And sometimes, yeah, you don't get what you want that first session, but you start the conversation. It's a bit of a long game and you need to be able to compromise, but you also, now to be annoying in giving that advice, you also need to be willing to recognize when you're slipping away from what you're trying to accomplish in the first place, right? Obviously, there's an end to compromise. Compromise is supposed to go both ways. Don't just yield and capitulate and
I
say,
want
okay,
you to compromise and
yeah,
come
exactly.
to where I am.
Exactly, right? So I think that's the guidance that I would give is you need to be able to work with people where they are, and then also you need to focus your time as best as you can. When I first started doing this, I had a shotgun approach where a couple of days I emailed every single person in the Florida legislature. You can do that if you really want to. I would not recommend that. I would recommend something, but you need to use your time and your efforts wisely, right? Who's worked on this subject matter that you're trying to do something with? Who's worked on criminal justice or housing or whatever it is? Who's worked on it before? Who's in the relevant committees? Have you talked with the committee staffers, the people who aren't necessarily visible, who have an enormous amount of influence on the policy? What does leadership think? What is the overall trend or lean of your policy? Is it something that's been done in a conservative state like Texas, or is it a policy that was implemented in Connecticut that you're now trying to implement in Florida? You might have a little trouble there. So just try to be strategic and focused with how you approach things.
Well, you guys, you just mentioned a couple of different states. It kind of did touch more on the. I was going to ask, how much do you think these experiences in advocacy in Florida would translate to other advocacy efforts? But I guess you guys kind of already answered that question. So we're going to move on to not quite the final question, but before a fun, random, non-political question. What is next for you guys specifically and for Florida Student Policy Forum? Are there any particular policies that you guys are going to advocate for next? Are you just recruiting more members to the forum or focusing on educating people about advocacy? What exactly are you guys planning?
I guess I should probably talk about this one. So, it's kind of everything you just said. We've got some really great policies that we've been honing in on for this upcoming session, and it's not just sort of like three people working on a bunch of policies like it to my knowledge has previously been.
Maybe.
It's a real group effort. We have policies regarding funding for vocational education. We've got dune protection, like sand dune protection. Let's see, we've got Florida friendly
Landscape.
lawn policies. Yeah, landscaping. We've got what are the other ones? We've got Graham, feel free to help me out here.
Let's see. There's the
Right to
landscaping.
repair.
Yeah.
And the last one is
Safety as well. And sex ed.
oh yes, that one. That one.
Wow, really running
So
the whole gamut of or gamut, excuse me, of policies there.
yeah, well, it helps that we just have a big group that's actually invested now. Last year was, I think, huge for the club in terms of building a base of people who care. And Adam, who couldn't be here today, did a great job of building that, as did Graham, and I think that really set us up for success in the future. Other than that, I've been working a lot this summer to kind of build the structure of the club up a little bit in terms of not letting institutional knowledge just die when Graham and Adam leave. We've been working on a lot of resources so that it doesn't have to be like a trial and error thing for every little thing. The way they had to go through it the last 2 years, so that we can hopefully be more efficient in how we reach out and in how we get things done. And then other than that, it's really just about building the club culture up as well. In terms of everyone, actually getting to know each other. In terms of, I don't know, just like knowing about what's going on outside of your tiny scope that is your one policy.
Gotcha. What about you, Graham? I mean, I know that you're a little bit, you're not quite as involved now that you've graduated, but what about you?
That's what you would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. That's just you'd think. I mean, the first thing I'll say is what Jacob is doing is a noble mission, right? Because when I started with this, and over the past couple of years, Constantine, who couldn't be here because pulled it to surgery, but Constantine and I, who's now in medical school, when we were doing this, I'd like to jokingly call it a strike team. It was Constantine and I, and then sometimes Adam or one other or two other people would come, but it was just Constantine and I doing this stuff all by ourselves, the lobbyist duo, but lobbyist again, advocate duo.
I'll use that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Advocates are good. Lobbyists are bad.
exactly evil. We
cannot.
were engaging with the process, trying to get stuff passed, learning how to do this trial by fire, I like to call it. Then Adam becomes president, and he starts to more so build the proper institutions being things that are self-perpetuating, right? That endure beyond, as Jacob said, the people with all the knowledge leaving, and then the club just dissolves. Adam really started the work of making this into something that will last, that will perpetuate. We'll see how long exactly, how long perpetual will be in this instance. And now what Jacob's trying to do is to continue that work to really formalize this. Now that we've accomplished even more with this legislative session, I mean, what he's doing is the most meaningful of all, because if the thing doesn't last, then it's some people who had a fun time and all, and then we all graduated, and the work didn't get to continue. The next generation of people didn't get to learn how to do it. In terms of my next steps, I mean, I've been working this summer as a policy fellow with the Florida Council of 100. It's an association of 100 businesses in Florida, and they advise the governor and the legislature on different public policy matters of interest to businesses. Right now, they've had me looking at property taxes, given the topical proposals of the governor and the legislature on that matter. But on the side, I've continued to do everything that I can to help with FSPF in terms of guiding the newer members on researching or writing their bills, or just coming up with lists of legislators whom we have the strongest relationships with and things like that. And then on the side, again, as part of Florida Student Policy Forum initiatives that we started last year with Representative Vicky Lopez, I am continuing to work with my own little small group on pushing for the affordable housing policies that we started last year that we couldn't get passed. So zoning and land use reform, things like transit-oriented development, or allowing starter homes to be built on smaller lots, allowing smaller scale multifamily housing near commercially zoned areas, things like that. We've been working on for a year, and I'm trying with my own little small group to see what we can get done on housing, because now's the time for housing. There's a housing subcommittee in the Florida House for a reason, right? And I think it's paramount to the success of Florida that housing can be attainable. And so in other words, I've been trying to continue to do stuff with Policy Forum. I've been working a summer job, and then I'll likely be applying to law school soon. That's what I'm up to.
And I just,
Nice.
would add that I think it's, the fact that Graham and Adam and people, who are graduating and in theory leaving the club are so committed to seeing it kind of, keep going and perpetuate, like he said, that they're still involved in this way is just kind of evidence that the model of advocacy that's been kind of formed, that's been shaped by these last few years really does work and really does stand a chance to make a big difference.
Absolutely. Hey, that's really fantastic to hear about you guys and doing this. And again, just having younger guys be so involved, and to have the prescience to think about how, well, we got to make sure that this thing is sustainable, that this keeps going on, because some people don't think far enough ahead. They just think about what's going on right now, but you also got to think about the future. So it's fantastic to hear you guys talk about that, to have those good heads on your shoulders. So we're going to end things off here with a little bit more of a fun question. I think people more of my generation and your generation would appreciate this kind of question. So for anybody who's new to the show, at the end of guest interviews, I always ask a fun, random, non-political question just to spice things up a little bit. So for you guys, today's question is a hot dog a sandwich?
Jacob, I defer to you. I need to think.
This might sound like it's an opinion answer, but there is a right answer to this, contrary to what some people may say. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, it's a sandwich. It's a sandwich.
No.
If a sub
No.
is a sandwich, then a hot dog is a sandwich.
No.
I
No.
mean, you're putting a thing, literally a thing, whatever in the world is. I don't even remember what's in a hot dog. You're putting a thing between two slices of bread, right? Does that not constitute?
No. Guys. See, again, that's the wrong answer. It is not a sandwich. You have to have two pieces of bread that are separate and designed to be separate, and then you could put ingredients there. And I'm willing to be a little bit more lenient on the types of ingredients you put in there, but I just praise you guys and all the great work you're doing in advocacy, and then you're gonna go tell me a hot dog is a sandwich. What are you guys doing?
Explain a sub. Explain a sub then.
A sub is a sub. It's not a sandwich.
Not a sandwich? Not
No,
wow.
it's its own specific thing. You can't.
Wow.
But you know what? That's okay. You guys are doing great work in advocacy, so I want to highlight that, even if we can agree to disagree on this point. But in any case, though, I really do appreciate you guys coming here to talk about this, talk about your experiences, and hopefully for you at home, you'll get a lot out of this and carry it with you in your own advocacy efforts. So that is going to do it for today's podcast episode. But well, first, any other media that either one of you wants to share?
I mean, the only other thing I would say is, hey, thanks. It's always a pleasure to talk about our work and get the opportunity to engage in introspection on it. You had me thinking about the past 4 years in detail and some of our lovely encounters with members of the legislature and such. And two, just none of this could have happened without a cadre of like-minded individuals, Jacob and Constantine and Adam, and again, also all the other legislators who were willing to take us seriously. It was very much a group effort, and I, again, would not have wanted to have spent my time on anything else besides my schoolwork. I would not have wanted to have spent my time on anything else these past 4 years. I think it was a rewarding and informative experience. Even when we failed, A, it was fun, it's entertaining, and B, we learned something. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah.
For any listeners who are interested, definitely feel free to check us out on Instagram at Florida Student Policy Forum or our website. And if you know anybody who's a student at UF and might be interested, definitely feel free to tell them to reach out or check us out once we're back on campus in the fall.
And hopefully the Florida Student Policy Forum can expand to other universities like my undergraduate alma mater, University of South Florida. So, but again, great work you guys are doing. I'll put a link to the Florida Student Policy Forum in the show notes. But for my show notes, my Facebook, Paul Rader, author and speaker, LinkedIn, on Medium, I write about political science from time to time. My Matchmaker FM profile, if you want to be a guest on this podcast or have me as a guest on your podcast. My 5-day educational email course about mistakes we make when depolarizing the political climate and how you can correct those mistakes and actually help depolarize the political climate, and my website. So all that's in the show notes. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Politics with Paul. So thank you all so much. And until next time, take care.